Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we are back in Planet Zoo for an awesome build, a pretty unique one where we built a grizzly bear habitat with 2 pens, with a total of 4 grizzly bears, an overhead viewing area and some cave viewings, as well as some extra outbuildings. It's a pretty cool and unique build, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how I built it, as well as give you a tour of the whole habitat in first person and overhead viewing. So stick around for that in the video, but before we get into all of that, please consider subscribing down below. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. It really does help out the channel. Alright, let's jump into the time-lapse portion and see how we built this build right now. Alright everybody, welcome to the time-lapse portion of this video. If you are someone who is not interested in watching the entire time-lapse of how we built that, I completely understand. There is timestamps in the description down below so you can skip ahead to the final build walkthrough to see what we made in this build. But for those who want to stick around and watch, welcome. We're going to see how we made this build today. And it sort of started out with an idea. I wasn't really sure exactly what kind of habitat I was doing here, what animals I wanted to do. I just wanted to do something a little different with some sort of like multiple path placement and sort of like a little complex area that looks a little more zooey than the normal copy paste sort of builds that I've been doing lately, where it's just like you build a cool habitat, you get some animals in there, then you put the guest paths around it, and that's about it. I wanted to do something a little more interactive, a little different, and a little unique. So that's sort of why I did sort of the start here like I did. And you know, like this building right now that I'm placing, I thought this was going to be a little food place that we'd build. It turned into something different, and that's just how it goes sometimes. I've been sort of a rut lately with my builds, where I've been building sort of similar builds. They've been a bit different in their own unique ways, you know, different animals sort of make that happen, but I wanted to do something that I necessarily haven't seen before, because everyone's seen sort of that you know the stereotypical Planet Zoo build where it's just like, you know, it's a lot of natural, nice area, and I guess that's sort of my style. Not everyone necessarily does a bunch of trees and a bunch of like natural features, but you know, that's pretty much what I've been doing, is just a bunch of builds with a bunch of those natural features, and then just putting sort of paths around it. Nothing to really interact the guests with the habitats a ton. More habitats built just for the animals, not the guests. It doesn't feel super realistic or zooey, so I really wanted to do that with this one, and I think we do accomplish a lot of that. Now, for this time-lapse portion, I did not get all of the footage put into it. Some of my footage towards the end, where I do a lot of the beautification, sort of placing trees, and sort of the final touches of the video, was corrupted. So I only really have sort of the frameworks and the start of sort of this whole habitat, but I think that gives you all a good background. If you wanted to recreate something like this, you could get the framework and then finish it up however you want to do it. Now, we'll show the final product in its full in the first person walkthrough, and you get to see everything that I did, but we did miss a little bit of it in this time-lapse portion, and I do apologize for that, but it's just one of those things that happens every once in a while where some footage gets corrupted for the time-lapse portion, so I didn't have a chance to put it in here, but we still see a lot of the rock work like I'm doing right now. I really wanted to go for a sort of cave realistic wall here, instead of the usual sort of habitat walls, either like with a short pedestrian wall and you just look into there, or you know, the usual different types of walls where you're up a little higher, so you're kind of looking down into the habitat, or vice versa. So this one's a bit different. It looks like sort of like natural mountains, sort of like caves, and I do use glass for here because they are grizzly bears, and you have to be a little cautious in that sense, but I think it turned out well. It looks a lot more realistic and looks like something you'd actually see in a zoo, as opposed to some of the other stuff that we normally go for habitats. Mostly it'll make them look nice and things like that, but this turns out nice, and it's definitely one of the bigger habitats in the zoo. It's going to be one of the higher budget ones if we're thinking from a realism standpoint, due to the fact that I use all of these sort of areas. There's 2 pens, there's like 2 buildings, there's a bunch of these rock work and different areas for the guests to walk around in, but it's unique and it's something we haven't done, and it looks pretty cool in the end. I can't wait to show you guys the final product, but I'd like to sort of do more builds like this in the future. Just pick an animal and try to make something a little more unique, so different areas of the zoo have different feels, you know, do different things, and maybe go over the top a little bit. You know, this one's kind of over the top. It's kind of a little crazy and a little unique. So I definitely think this is a trend that I'm going to try to do with some of the bigger animals in the zoo. Of course, a lot of the smaller animals are going to be in smaller habitats and things like that. But, you know, bigger animals, they do spend a lot of money on habitats like these, and it makes sense, and it shows when you go to zoos. So I think that's something that shows here and is realistic to a point. I mean, you don't want to go super Disney over the top with everything, but I think it's a good balance here. Once we finish doing sort of these cave window look-through areas, we're going to start working on this top overhead viewing area where I sort of made this outbuilding, and we're going to show it a little later in the time lapse here, where this outbuilding is going to have a little path, and we kind of do it right now. The outbuilding has a little path that goes for this sort of viewing over the two habitats in the middle, and I think that was a little cool thing to do. I just had this little area that separated the two pens, and I was like, maybe we could put a little viewing area here. We changed this building that I was going to make into a food building into sort of the walkway where you walk up into it. It can be sort of an education center. It doesn't really have to have a huge purpose other than having the guests be able to walk up and see the overhead viewing of the grizzly bears, because I think that's enough of a justification to have sort of this build be here from a realistic standpoint. And the reason I went for two pens is I was thinking, you know, we could have the bears switch pens. Sometimes it could be in one pen or the other. We have a female and a male in one, and we have two males in the other. Kind of reminds me of the Detroit Zoo when I do visit there. They have 3 grizzly bears that are all brothers, so a lot of males. Usually you don't see males in captivity together, so that's sort of why I wanted to go for that, because I have seen that in a realistic way, even though the game says not to. But I think it turns out good. I think it looks nice, and this is me sort of struggling with the paths to try to get it in the right spot. And we're just going to build a sort of lodge or like lumber looking building, like a sawmill sort of type building, in order to fit with sort of the theme of the grizzly bear. You know, it's the Northern Trail still. This is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest attraction in the Northern Trail area. At least that's what I plan on it being. So let's really go all out. Let's make it look really cool. Do things like this. I do plan on building, you know, a food area next to this grizzly bear habitat, maybe across the path there, maybe next to it. Maybe I'll integrate it in another video, but I'm thinking that could be a mini build here soon. So stay tuned on the channel for that if you're interested in seeing something like that. But going from here, it's just going to be sort of doing some of the terrain in these habitats. So I wanted both the habitats to be a little different, but also similar at the same time, because it just makes sense in that from a realistic standpoint. We'll do a little bit of touch up here on these outer areas. I wanted to do some of these stone borders. I think they look really nice with some vegetation in them, but not on every single spot, because that would get a little too pretty for like a zoo habitat, I would think. So I just kind of do what I do here and make a bunch of different natural trees and everywhere, just like sort of the look we've been going for in the zoo so far. And we're going to start working on the terrain here for the habitats. A little bit of height variance, you know, we have some highs, we have some lows, and I do put a little bit of a pond in for each of the grizzly bear pens, so they have a drinking area, they can go swim and bathe in those as well. So that's about it for the time-lapse portion. As I said, we did lose some of the footage past this point due to corruption, so you're going to see me place a couple of these enrichment items, and then we're going to jump right into the first-person walkthrough and see the final build right now. Alright everybody, welcome to the first-person real-time walkthrough of the video. We are here in the finished grizzly habitat here with the 2 pens and all of its glory with these nice little walking areas. And to me, this is amazing. This looks great. It's very unique. It feels like we're actually in a zoo as opposed to a zoo video game, you know what I mean? It's very natural, and we're right down the road from the timber wolf habitat. If you haven't seen that episode, go check it out. That one was awesome. But let's take a look at this awesome build. And for this sort of entrance area on both sides here, we just have a lot of twisting paths, so you can sort of take a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different routes, and just enjoy yourself. And here's our little entrance to the overfed viewing and all of that. And here's sort of these twisting paths. Just looks like you're taking a walk through the woods. We got some benches everywhere, and just beautiful. I really love how this turned out. It feels natural, it's unique, it's something a bit different than what we normally do. And we'll jump around this side and take a look at pen number 2, since the other one I do consider is number 1. This is the one with the 2 male grizzly bears here. As you can see, they're just hanging out in there. We have different little cave viewings. I have an education sort of spot here for educators to come and talk to them. The guests about the bears on both sides. And here is the first pen, and we're just gonna walk this way. This is sort of the entrance, and we'll check this out to the overhead viewing area. You're gonna go under this sort of bridge here, and it just feels really cool and really sort of interconnected to each other. I really love this build. Over here we have the male and the female grizzly bear in this other pen. There's sort of that middle building where the bears hang out when they hibernate in the winter or at night, things like that. They're taking a snack over there, but this one we have more winding paths, more little cave areas, and just a lot of points where you can just look into the habitat, see the bears from a bunch of different angles. It gives the bears places to hide and hang out, but also, you know, places for the guests to sort of see them in interesting ways. So I think this sort of guest area looks great. Got some guests hanging out on the benches here. Perfect. It's like a little garden sort of area. Looks like you're walking through a park, and we're gonna go walk up to the overhead view here, where you can get a look above. Now we didn't do an interior in here. I warn you right away. It wasn't big enough to do so. I did stick a little food building in here just to sort of give the guests an option down this way. But you just walk right up, and then you're over top here to look at both of the pens at once. And I sort of went for this little mesh rope stopper, just a realism aspect, just in case someone accidentally falls over this fence. They don't go into the grizzly bear habitat, because that would be not so good. But here is the first pen that we have the female and the male grizzly bear hanging out. They got different areas that they can go into. Lots of vegetation, some areas for them to hide, little height variance, as well as some water. And then over this way we have the 2 males in here, a little more of a mountain on this side, and some different enrichment items. So the plan is that you could switch out these bears between the 2 pens, and they'd get to play around with different enrichment items as sort of a realistic aspect here. But that is pretty much all we should see in the first person walkthrough. Let me jump out into the overhead camera. We can get some better looks at the rest of this habitat. All right, folks, we are now in the overhead camera, and I really just love the look here. It's different, it's unique, and I think it's very natural and organic, especially the paths down here, how they sort of twist around. You get a bunch of different viewings of the different pens of the grizzly bears, as well as sort of the overhead viewing where you can walk up into this building, check it out. And from a realistic standpoint, I would say this building would probably house some education material for the grizzly bears, maybe some food, things like that, because it's hard to get the scale in Planet Zoo. This looks like a pretty big building where they could do a lot in real life, but in Planet Zoo it's hard to fit sort of the stairwell so the guests can walk up all the way over here. But taking a look from above, these look cool. They look great, they're beautiful. I have this sort of building for the grizzly bears, and basically they have their little pens inside. There's not really an interior in here, but they have their 2 pens right next to each other, and I think from the outset this building looks like it has a lot of purpose here, and could do pretty much all that the grizzly bears would need in sort of like hygiene, health, and safety, and all those sort of things that a zoo would have realistically. We got the 2 male and female bears walking around here. There's little spots for them to sort of hide away from the guests, sleep, just walk around. They could go up here, take a little gander, and things like that. And then this other pen for the 2 males here, we have sort of more rocky terrain where they can go up over here, so sort of things like that. They have different enrichment items. A little bit bigger of a pond, but less viewing areas on this side, but you can get more of a view from the overhead on this pen than you can with this other one. There's still places to hide when you're looking up from above here. But yeah, that's pretty much it, folks. I hope you did enjoy this build. I had a lot of fun doing it. I think it's a little different, a little more unique, and a bit more realistic than the past builds have been. And I'm very happy with the result. I hope you guys did like it too. Leave me a like if you did. Make a comment about what you think of the build. or what you want to see in the future for this project. Got more videos coming soon with some other animals and a new DLC potentially on the horizon here, and we're gonna potentially do a giveaway on the channel, so get subscribed so you don't miss that giveaway of the new DLC when it's released. But that is all I have for today. I hope you guys did like this one. Alright everybody, that is all I have for today. I hope you did enjoy the build. I think it was really unique and looked really great in the end. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so down below. It really does help out the channel. Leave a like if you did enjoy the build, and leave a comment if you want to say something about the build or something about the future of the zoo project in general. Thank you so much for sticking around to this point if you did. I really do appreciate it. I'll have more content coming soon in the future, but until then you can check out all this stuff in the playlist down below if you haven't already for the rest of the Tacoma Zoo builds, as well as some other Planet Zoo content. I'll see you all in the next episode, but until then, I'm McSnazzi, and thank you for stopping by.